What's up, everybody? Welcome to Deep in the Plus. I'm your host, Rob Whiteside. Thank you guys so much for being with us tonight. We really appreciate every time you tune in. Do not forget, if you have not already subscribed to WDWNT TV, please do so. And also give us a thumbs up. It helps people to find us. And, you know, and it just so happens I have Allison with me tonight. How are you?
Hi, friends. Hi, Rob. How are you?
I'm good. So it's the end of spooky season on Deep in the Plus. We've been doing, we did Werewolf by Night, we did Toy Story of Terror, we did, why am I blanking on the first one we did? What the heck? There's something else. Anyway, now we're doing Maleficent. And the funny thing is, early on, we decided we were going to do Maleficent. When Jill and I were doing this, we were going to do Maleficent, and we were like, wait a minute, it's not on Deep in the Plus. If you've never tuned in before, our Deep in the Plus, Disney Plus, our only rule is it has to be on Disney Plus to be on Deep in the Plus, and this one wasn't on. So we were like, it'll come back. I could have sworn it was on. You and I talked about this. We were like, let's just do Maleficent. That'll be great. And then you were like, hey, by the
Yeah.
way, this is the sequel, not the original. So we're like, okay, the original's still not on Disney Plus. Let's talk about the sequel. And it's weird to me because the sequel is called Maleficent, Mistress of Evil. This is a very
Right.
confusing title, I feel like.
Sounds like they're introducing Maleficent as a character, but it's very confusing that this is the one. They should have years specifically next to the title if they're going to do this.
Yeah, they should do like Adele does and just put like the name, like she names her albums after how old she is when she makes them. So they should do that. This is Maleficent 2019 as opposed to Maleficent 2014. When they first came out with Maleficent, I loved that movie because I was like, you're retelling the story from the villain's point of view so that now I don't feel like she's the villain. I feel like she's almost justified in what she was doing because in the Disney cartoon, she's just bad. And in the Disney parks and in stories and in Phantasmic, Maleficent is just like pure evil. And now in this story, we're like, oh, there's a reason. Like this is what led her down this path to be horrible and evil. And so I feel like you kind of like sympathize with her. And you know, we've had so many live action movies in general, and you and I kind of talked about this a little bit, but I want to get your thoughts on this again. Does Disney make too many live action movies? And if so, where does just the first Maleficent fall for you as far as the live action retellings go?
Yeah, well, generally, yes, they do make too many live actions, although I don't mind watching them or I choose not to watch them. It's like that's really my choice. What's special about the original Maleficent is that it's not a retelling. It is from her perspective. And so it's sort of in that vein of like Wicked, and there was a whole series of books that Wicked was originally adapted from that retold classic stories from the villain's perspective. So there's like a Cinderella one told from the stepsister's perspective. And this is like maybe 10, 15 years after that was a thing, but it was like it's sort of in that vein, and that makes it special. It's not a frame for frame remake like Beauty and the Beast or like The Lion King. I think there's space for that. It's fun to occasionally revisit that and enjoy, but there's like a real purpose behind the movie Maleficent. And I watched it first on an airplane ride, not expecting much, and thinking like, oh, actually, this is a fantastic movie.
It's
Oh, I
funny you
can't
should
hear you,
say that
Rob.
because when I first watched it, I watched it on a cruise ship, the original one. I was
Oh,
actually on a
wow.
Disney cruise ship where they will show you first run movies, and that was the very first time I'd ever seen it. And so I was like, you know, this it was a neat thing to do. I saw Maleficent on a cruise ship, Captain America, Winter Soldier, and
Mhm.
Herbie Fully Loaded. There you go. So when when I saw the first one, I was like, okay, if they're gonna do more like this, where they kind of almost like you were just saying, almost like turn the tables so that it's a different story or coming from a different point of view, then I'm on board. But as I've said on this show many times before, the Lion King one left me flat. It was a beautiful movie, but at the same time, it didn't need to be a shot for shot remake of the animated because the animated one had so much heart and it was not different at all. And so when you do Beauty and the Beast and you add like the storyline about like where her mom was and like what happened there, okay, I'm on board. Aladdin mixes it up a little bit. Cruella is very much in the same vein as Maleficent, with, kind of, again, kind of showing us where this character came from originally and why she has the motivation she has. So in the original Maleficent, I was totally on board with the way that they put that one together, and I would actually herald that as one of the better live action tellings, because it's coming at it from a different angle. And I think Angelina Jolie totally just owns this character. There are times when it's like, okay, this is just Angelina Jolie, but sometimes you look at it and you're like, wow, she's just like when she says hello beastie. I mean, right?
Chills. Yes. She's absolutely chilling. Yeah, I mean the makeup is great. Her look is great. Her just like yeah, she's fantastic. And the acting is actually really good in both the original Maleficent and this very confusingly named sequel to Maleficent.
Right. All right. So let's go back to the name of that, because like if you I mean, Toy Story, we were talking about Toy Story of Terror last week, and if y'all haven't watched that one, Patrick and I went back and we talked about Toy Story of Terror and how it relates to Halloween and spooky season. But with Toy Story, there was Toy Story, and there was Toy Story 2, and there was Toy Story 3, and there was Toy Story 4, and that's all they did. They just called it that. It wasn't like Toy Story 3, The Revenge of Al, or anything like that. It was always kind of like, okay, we're just putting this together as like, just we're putting a number on
Yeah.
it so you're not confused at all. But like with
This is
this
like
one,
making Toy Story 4 and calling it Introducing Woody.
right, because this one again is called Mistress of Evil, and when you look at this, there is nothing to me that indicates this is a sequel, except there's something in this verbiage where it says the story of Disney's most iconic villain continues. So I guess really
Right,
that's
but
the
that
only
could be from
thing.
the animated film. Like,
Right.
this it doesn't really tell you anything.
Yep. No, I agree. And yet again, it looks like this is like the first movie. And so, I thought, oh, okay, well, we could talk about the first movie. The first movie's on there, but it wasn't. And honestly, I think I've only seen this one once, and I don't think it's because I hated it. I don't think. But when, but when I went, had you had seen this one, the sequel before?
No, I had only seen the original 8 years
Okay,
ago. And so when
gotcha.
I was 20 minutes into the sequel before, I was like, this just doesn't seem like the movie that I remember. And that's when I pinged Rob thinking, I'm not sure this is on Disney Plus. No, I had never seen this version. It's, yeah, I guess it came out in 2019. It kind of makes sense. They gave birth in early 2019. So actually, between that and the pandemic, the last thing I saw in the theaters was like in 2018. Like,
Right.
had not been going to the theaters, and it was not really like aware of things. And this certainly didn't perform particularly well at the box office, particularly not after the first weekend, that it was even on my radar that this had been made.
Gotcha. So again, this is all based on the original Sleeping Beauty movie with Princess Aurora and the story of Prince Philip and how he finds her, and she had been cursed as a baby, and so the fairies take care of her, and she's Briar Rose, and she's in the woods, and then she finds her way back to the castle and touches the spindle and falls into a sleep, and then Prince Philip comes and wakes her from her sleep with a kiss, and happily ever after. And then in the first movie, it kind of follows a little bit of that, but in this one, it picks up with Aurora is Queen of the Moors. Okay, so I mean, so I'm thinking of like George R. R. Martin and the whole like
Yes.
were you thinking that too?
Yeah, I'm thinking about The Hobbit. I'm thinking about like this is we've created now a whole fantasy world that did not exist before,
Yeah.
and we've just been dropped into it. We've created like all new species, all new like an entire new kingdom, neighboring kingdom that didn't exist before. Like
Right.
I have so many questions, and there's no exposition. You're just dropped into it. So I spent the whole movie being like, what is even going on here?
Well, and that's something that recently I've been complaining about, is that some of the more basic stories will have exposition built in to the point of just nausea. Like it's just bothersome, like, how bad it is. It's like, oh, it's great to see you, Allison, and your four kids, and the one that's in college, and the one that's in this, and, And you're just like, enough. Like, just spoon feed me a little at a time. Don't go over the top with that. And it's usually a cheesy TV pilot or something like that that does it. But there is a lot of Disney that does it that way. So I mean, it's really, it starts to get on your nerves after a while, or my nerves anyway, with the exposition. But you're right; it was kind of the opposite of that. It's like it opens up in the darkness with these guys going across the water to, you don't really know where at this point, and they're going to steal something, and you find out that they're trying to steal fairies. Then along the way, they see this like glowing flower. The guy goes, "Oh, that's pretty. I'm gonna steal one." And then Maleficent shows up, but you don't really know it's her yet because you just see her from the back and the horns, and you know it's her, but you haven't seen her face. And then she basically tears these first two guys up, and then the third guy gets away, and he goes and he gives the fairy and to this guy, and he's like, "Oh, and I see that the bloom, and I want that too." And then it's like goes to daylight and Maleficent, and we hear a little bit of, well, you see the logo, and we hear a little bit of narration, and then it kind of takes us through like like almost like a drone shot through the woods, and we get to see Aurora, and we're told that she is the queen of the Moors, and this is a very special day. And it almost feels like the Lion King, as all of these fairy folk are like gathering on the queen on her on this special day. They're all headed off to see her. But also, let me back up a second and say it confuses me that everything, it's almost like they're all fairy, like everything's a fairy, even though like one's like a
Mhm.
mushroom dude, one's like a porcupine.
Various kinds of fairies with
Right.
name.
What
There's
what are,
fays, there's fairies. Ever
what are
no
the
idea.
rules, Allison? Explain the fairy rules to me.
I cannot explain the rules. I watched this movie twice to try to understand what was going on. I couldn't understand it, and then I read the Wikipedia article to try to understand what was going on, and I couldn't fully understand it. To me, they basically tried to do what they tried to make this follow Frozen 2, or like make it the same plot, and it just didn't at all work. But I'm very confused. I hope that everyone watching this is also confused because that would make me feel better about my inability to understand this movie. Which, by the way, I don't know who this movie is for because I can't figure out if it's for like children or adults or who the target audience is that's supposed to enjoy this movie and supposed to be able to follow this plot and understand it and feel invested in this world that they created, despite it being movie three and feeling very divorced from the first two.
I
Sorry,
will tell you
I've got a
though
lot of
that
ranting to do.
no, 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 that's fine. But I will tell you, I'm not sure I'm on the same page as you on this one.
Oh, good.
So
Let's have a debate.
yeah, exactly. Because I feel like you're coming in hot, and I'm like, this may have changed my mind, and maybe it's because of the way you set me up. You're like, I'm ready to talk about this. Man, you were fired up. But someone said like Angelina Jolie was perfect casting for this. I can't imagine anybody better. I mean, she
Yeah,
just owns it. Elle Fanning as
all of
Aurora.
it. Elle Fanning. I thought Elle Fanning was very good. I thought
Yeah,
like Michelle Pfeiffer was fantastic. The acting is great. They spent all the money on the acting, and then we haven't even talked about the effects.
they spent all their money on the acting. Yeah, so you're right. I mean, it's they brought back not much of the cast because most of the cast gets killed in the first one. I mean, we have Elle Fanning back, we have Sam Riley back as the Raven, and we have Angelina Jolie back. But most of the people got annihilated in the first movie. So we're introduced to a lot of new characters in this. But let me go back to something we were talking about earlier when we were talking about like Game of Thrones and this and Hobbit and all these others, this world that they've created. Is do you like it when they take an original story and then they add lore to it like this, or would you rather them be like Harry Potter? They're just interpreting the Harry Potter books into movies. In this case, it would almost be like as if somebody made an eighth Harry Potter, a ninth Harry Potter movie without J.K. Rowling,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because they're
Yeah,
somebody's
yeah.
taking a lot of liberties with this. Is that good because we're seeing a whole new world, or is that bad because it doesn't fit with the original vision?
For me, it's not whether it's good or bad, it's the execution. And I just like they have to take me along with it, and I felt dropped in and really disoriented, and I didn't understand what I was watching or what this world was. And so I think there's a way to tell that story that like doesn't hit you over the head with like set the setup like you're describing, Rob. Like we don't want that either, where you're spoon fed things, but doesn't leave me like confused and also disinvested. I think that's part of it. It's hard to pay attention to something that you don't feel invested in from the start.
Yeah, my wife always says if I don't like the characters, I'm not going to like whatever it is. But now that I'm looking back on it, though, it's a 2 hour, like, I think at the runtime is like 1 hour and 51 minutes. They're telling a lot of story in that amount of time. Do you think that maybe it's just because they, like, cut out the explanation for time and they're like, they'll catch
That
up?
could be. That could be. And for me also like motivations were really fuzzy. I didn't understand like why Michelle Pfeiffer was like so evil and so wanting to oppress the fairies. And, like some kind of backstory there would have been helpful. So they could have cut a lot for time because they've got to keep this just shy of 2 hours. The original Maleficent is just an hour and a half. So for this to be that much longer, uh, and it still leave me with like a lot of questions and hard to with a plot that's hard to follow.
But
And by the way, if you look at the Wikipedia page about it, they talk about how like the actors are lauded for their interpretations of the characters, but that they were kind of slammed because the plot was convoluted and hard to follow. So I do feel like I'm not the only one that was confused there.
no, 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 no. And as a matter of fact, like, so you were talking about Queen Ingrid, who is Philip's mother, and she seems to have something wrong from the beginning that she doesn't like this union, and it could just be because of Maleficent, and but she is very manipulative, and she's playing these things like I mean she plays everyone in this, and so as it starts, you don't know that motivation. Is it weird though that in the end she just dumps that motivation and she's like, it's like, why are you doing this? Well, let me tell you why. But shouldn't we have known from the beginning so we were on that journey with her, I think is what you're saying.
Yes, that's exactly right. Like it just doesn't make any sense, and it's very hard to be invested in the film and like understand what's going on if like her motivations are so unclear.
Yeah. But I mean, but they do tell us. They just tell us after she's already
Yeah,
destroyed everything. And,
yeah. In
and
an hour 46 minutes in, we get like the
yeah.
explanation,
And
but it's very hard from the start.
and very much like Frozen 1, Prince Hans at the end doesn't really get his comeuppance. That same thing kind of feels like it happens with Queen Ingrid, but we can talk about that later. I will tell you another thing that sort of, for no particular reason, bothered me is how many people in this movie are also in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Did that bother you at all, or was it
Okay,
just
lay it
me?
on. Well, lay it on me because you know I'm not a huge Marvel person. So
Oh, okay.
how many connections do we have here?
Well, okay. So Angelina Jolie was Athena in the Eternals, which was a small role, but she
Okay.
was in she was kind of the leader of the Eternals for that movie, and then um, Michelle Pfeiffer is Janet Van Dyne in Ant Man, which there's an Ant Man trailer that just dropped a couple days ago, and so now that I'm seeing this, it's like it's hard for me to see her as it used to be hard for me to see Michelle Pfeiffer as anything other than Catwoman, and now it's sort of hard for me to see her as anything other than Janet Van Dyne. So like I'm just very much like okay, so uh, you know they're both Marvel Cinematic Universe people. Also, uh, I always mess up his name, but Chedwell Ejiofor, who played Connell in this
Yeah.
movie, he plays in the Doctor Strange movies. So you've got some like I'm just like Marvel, 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 but maybe it's just because it's getting so big, kind of like the Harry Potter universe was so big that
Yeah.
every British actor at some point or another was in those movies. The same thing with actors being in the Marvel Cinematic
Like
Universe, where
every
you've got
A-lister. And that guy's in like so many other movies too, beyond the Marvel universe. His filmography is bananas.
yeah, so that was a little distracting to me. I kept thinking about the ties between them and the Marvel Cinematic Universe, but also in here is Warwick Davis, who was Wicket in Star Wars. He is the one that plays this evil pixie who is creating all the weapons of war for the Queen. So as the movie goes on, in the beginning we meet. Uh, uh, I'm gonna call her Queen, but like I guess Queen Aurora of the Moors in doing her daily duties, I guess, and then she gets pulled aside. She ends up proposed are getting proposed to from Prince Philip, and everybody in the Moors is like they're involved with it. They're part of the scheme, and it was just a thing that they just apparently knew was going to happen at some point. And they're like, oh, we got to tell our parents. At that point, I had forgotten that her parents were dead. Um, so so that like she's like her godmother, and she has to tell her, and then Philip goes and tells his parents, and that's when we meet the queen, and she doesn't hide that she is not a fan from the beginning, but when she lures Maleficent in because she wants to have them over for dinner, she is so evil in this. And it occurred to me, I don't know, have we seen Michelle Pfeiffer in anything this evil before?
She's played a villain before, but I don't know where. I think she does a really great job of it. I was watching with my husband. We're both like, "Ooh, she's shockingly good at this." Because to me, she's like a rom-com person from the '90s. That's how I think of
Right.
Michelle Pfeiffer. That's the image that I can't shake, and I do remember the Catwoman role very well.
Yeah, and
But
I was about to
that's
say,
what
like, Catwoman's a villain, but she's not like
not
evil,
like
not
this.
like this.
Yeah,
And so
this
the
is
whole
this is
thing
just
with
like pure evil. Yeah.
yeah. And a little bit of exposition happens where we learn that the fairies can't touch iron because she's been
Hmm.
invited in, and she sits down at the table, and she can't pick up the fork, and they're like, why? Oh, because it's iron. And they're like, oh, okay. But obviously the queen sort of knew that all along. We kind of figure out without too much explanation that the queen's up to something.
Hmm.
So at least that part they were able to explain to us pretty easily.
Yeah, I mean,
Um,
as soon as you see her, like the first image of her, you're like, okay, yeah, which I think is like she's doing target practice with her archery things, and you're just like, oh, yes, this woman is obviously the bad guy here, and this is not going to be any secret. So there's that. It's just like, but why we don't know until an hour and 46 minutes in or so.
Well, and the other problem with a sequel is, and I think I talked about this on something else recently, is the problem is you have to make everything bad again. Like in the first movie, you go on a journey and it is resolved, and then in the
Right.
second movie, you have to create that conflict again, and I hate that. I hate that feeling. Like, okay, they're living all happily ever after, everything's good, but now we have to like, split Maleficent and Aurora apart. We have to make them kind of doubt each
Hmm.
other. Even though they've been living together for this incredible amount of time, the queen can step in and make them doubt each other like that. And that's where you
And
go,
you know
wait,
what's also confusing is they start with that where there's some doubt, right? She's accepting this proposal and is like, but do I have to tell my mother? Like it, and it's almost played for laughs. And then also there's some like the social awkwardness of Maleficent is also played for laughs. And then there's like no more laughing the rest of the movie. And so there's like this weird tonal shift.
yeah, or like the part, the four laughs you're talking about is when she's standing at the water and she's trying to like practice into the water like a reflection how she's going to smile.
Right.
So that reminds me of like Beauty and the Beast in the original where they're like show us a smile, and he does like the
Oh
fangs. And
yeah.
yeah, so she's got
Yeah.
the fangs on. I just I don't know that was that. Mm, I didn't take that part that way the same, but I do think sometimes they'll force an element into the movie that you were like, okay, this is going to mean something later. And that, I think, to me, was the whole thing with her covering her horns,
Hmm.
right? And I don't
Yeah.
know that the payoff was there for that. Like, they make such a big deal of it in the early part, and they bring it back a couple of times. And then she gets to have the punchline at the end about cover your horns, but I don't know. I mean, I think that was supposed to drive this wedge in between, and Aurora does mention at some point, after the queen has put that into her head, hey, I shouldn't have done that. I shouldn't have made her cover her horns. I shouldn't have made her not be who she was. But I don't think that was they expanded upon that enough. I think
No,
it just
I mean, I think that the whole thing is supposed to be this like the fairies are discriminated against and they're oppressed, and like the horns, I guess, are indicative of her status as like not fully human, and so we're going to cover those because of that. But you're right, it's not a thread that's like carried throughout, and So yeah, with the and figuring you have all these other different kind of fairies, the mushrooms, and all these other really poorly designed CGI or poorly executed CGI characters, and then there's no. It's just not clear exactly what the thing is that's offensive about them.
So you mentioned that earlier. Let's talk about that. You feel like that the CGI in this was lacking?
I was shocked that this went to the theaters. That this was not like a direct to video sequel. There are like I guess there are some like images of the landscape that look totally fine. But like the trees and the animated things I think look really terrible, and it's kind of shocking that this is a 3-year-old movie to me.
Very interesting. I don't know. I was looking at some stuff and trying to feel like, did I don't know. That didn't stand out to me as much as I didn't like the build of the characters, if that makes sense. Like their
Mm.
choice of characters I had a problem with, but not
Mm.
necessarily the actual animation itself.
Well, I trust you on that. You are the visual person. I'm not a visual person. All I know is it just didn't look right.
No, that's fine. I mean, I'm looking right here at like here's one that I wasn't quite a fan of is this little dude, and I think they were trying to make him look cute by making him look ugly in sort of like an ET sort of a way, but
Yeah,
I don't
I
know.
think that
I
looks
don't know.
cheap. I think that
Okay.
looks super cheap.
Yeah.
It
Um.
looks like Skippy from Extraterrestrial Alien Encounter.
I mean, sure. No, you're not wrong. You're not wrong on that. Sometimes the things and the effects that they do, though, as I'm looking at some of like the making of, just makes me laugh. Like this is how they did this. They had a dude standing there in a green screen, just like moving her around. That seems weird. Um, overall, I was not bothered by the effects, and maybe the problem was I was trying to look too closely into what it was I was watching and try to absorb, what this was. But I think in general, I was able to follow the story along. I just felt like there were pieces missing. And then as far as like things would happen too fast, that's again the problem that I have is that them being like just bonded in life and Aurora being so good about, understanding the trials that Maleficent has been through and goes through and being able to be very understanding with her and that just because the queen says something would drive a wedge between them so easily, I think that happens too fast. But
Mm.
again, they took this movie and they made it an hour 51. But not only do we learn about the Moors and this relationship and then this new kingdom, as you mentioned, but then there's this secret that the queen has that she goes in and she's got this huge, like, orc style, like, war about to happen where she's got all of these people. How are you keeping the secret from the king? She's got, like, dozens of people locked up in the basement making up like all these weapons and things. So I mean, I don't know how you keep that a secret. Um, I don't
Yeah,
know. It just
yeah,
seemed
and it's
weird.
exposed at the dinner, right? Like someone gave the order, like something's going on in this kingdom. And he's like, that sounds like an accusation. I'm offended.
Yeah.
Like clearly, maybe we should ask a little bit about what's going on. But it does seem to me that he's like under a spell of some kind almost, but that also isn't like um, isn't made clear.
Wait, the king is under a spell?
Like that he just seems so
Clueless?
clueless that it's almost like he's
Kind of like the Sultan in Aladdin.
yes, exactly.
Yeah, but and maybe that was a story that they left out. I did find it
Yeah.
interesting that she has this really fancy like clothing room, and she has this one mannequin, and she turns its head, and this secret wall comes up. Because if if you're
Yeah,
not
and the
really
way
trying
she
hard to
turns the head,
hire,
that was perfect.
yeah, I mean, if you're not trying really hard to hide the like what's going on in the basement from everybody, like if you had one or two people, I'd understand you could keep them secret, but it seems like it's the whole place. And then her little helper, like, does she seem way off?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I don't know what was happening with her, but it was very strange. It was that it's not, it's Gerda, I guess is who that is. Um, but she just was like, there was something weird about her the whole time, and I'm just looking at her going, what? Who is this, right? Because she's really kind of small and sort of pixie like, but she's like her like right hand man, and kind of doing the queen's bidding. Um, and so once they ruin dinner and the queen starts to and Maleficent flies away, she goes up to the roof, calm as can be, breaks out this this crossbow and shoots a piece of iron at Maleficent. It takes her out like that. And it's like,
Hmm.
wow, what is her backstory? Like, let's learn about her. She's kind of a master of everything here. She's got the protocols down. She's the one doing the dirty work. She's the one running everything in the basement with the weapons and everything. I don't know what her deal was, but I don't want to mess with her. She freaks me out. So then, after she knocks her down, I guess there was a plan that they would get her and bring her head to the queen, and so some weird thing came and drug her out from the water and took her away. And that's when we find out that there are other fae, there are other dark fae, and then there's a whole like village of them, and that whole thing. So now at that point, I'm like, this could have been a third movie. That's my opinion. No,
Like, wait, sorry, like fourth movie, right?
fourth movie. So you're counting Sleeping Beauty as the first one,
Yeah.
Maleficent is the second one.
Maleficent.
This is
Yeah.
the
No,
third
you're
one.
right.
Yeah, it could
Yeah.
have been its own movie though, because it was like this entire culture, and we didn't really get into that. He's kind of giving some narration to her and explaining it to her so that we understand it. Of that they had to be in hiding, and that they're underground, and that there's different types. There's desert versions, and and rainforest versions, and snow versions, and it's just like, okay, this is all that you're wasting everything here. You should have probably done a tighter
Right.
movie with the storyline of the evil queen, and then maybe introduce one of those characters, and then in the fourth movie we go back and find like, oh, that guy's going to take us back to to find out about the lore, because I feel like you missed out on a bunch of stuff there.
Yeah. And I think actually to me that's like that's the the movie they should have done before this, and it should be Aurora's Queen of the Moors, and then there's this like society of fays, and build the world there, and then the second movie is Aurora falls in love with the neighboring kingdom's prince, and there's the neighboring kingdom is the problem with it, and that would have made more sense. It would have been easier to follow, but it was just too many subplots.
Yeah, and then there's too many weird like small things that we don't understand, like those the Toon Blooms. So Warwick Davis's character, this pixie whose wings have been clipped, is in the basement doing all this evil bidding. And by the way, he turns on a dime and becomes a nice guy, just like that. And it seems like, wait a minute, you were like the ultimate evil down here, right? You're like plotting and planning and telling her all the ways to kill all the fairies and all that kind of stuff. And now you're gonna go,
Yeah.
oh, let me just let everybody free.
Yeah. I mean, that's an issue I have with the end of the movie, right? Because she needed this like army of people carrying out her bidding, but as soon as like she was neutralized, everyone was like, okay, we're totally fine to be friends.
Yeah. So he's mixing up this potion that will apparently take fairies and turn them into, I don't know. It does two different things, I guess. If it's the fae, it turns them into dust, and if it's a regular fairy, I guess, that just turns them into a plant. Is that what we're doing?
I don't know, and this is so hard to care.
It's so hard to care. Okay, all right, that's fine. So the part I kind of glossed over on is that the king has collapsed during dinner, and they've blamed that on Maleficent and taken him off. And they like the princess, like, Mom, you could save him the way I did her, and just give him like the true love's kiss. And she's like, oh, it's not that kind of thing. And then she's like, you wanted peace, rest in
It's not
peace.
that kind of thing.
um, and then along the way, this little guy who's mixing, this chemist in the basement, doing his Breaking Bad, he figures out that you could take this iron and mix it with this tune bloom and make this dust that will just again turn the fairies away. And she's like, well, let's go get more. And this is a little bit of a dark turn. Apparently, the place where the tune blooms like grow is on their burial ground.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah,
that
and
was
by
out of
the way,
left
this whole
field.
thing, yeah, that was super weird. And all, by the way, this whole like existence of these blooms is like very like tangled. Like we got to get this special flower thing that grows in this particular place, and it's going to be fraught to get the thing. And
There's a bigger tangled connection at the end.
oh,
So, but let's talk about this for a
let's get
second. So,
there.
yeah, so they go and they're getting now, like now that they've done this and Maleficent's seen what they're doing, she goes back, she decides that this guy who's leading the Fae, that he wants to start a war, and she's mad. She's like, yep, let's do it, let's start a war. But before that, there'd been this whole like speech about transformation and how, again, it very vague, right? The whole thing about you come from this person that's in like this phoenix that's buried in amber, and you're part of her, and that kind of makes that connection between Maleficent and the dragon from the first movie.
Hmm.
But it's like, okay, you're part of her, and this is like, we need to be transforming, and we need to be peaceful and grow with the humans and not in the humans. The other thing is that they talk about humans and how humans have ruined everything, but they only seem to worry about this one kingdom. Like, don't we assume that
Hmm.
like all of these folk that came from the Arctic and the desert, that they have their own human demons somewhere, right? So why
Yeah,
why
yeah.
descend upon this place?
Especially because these kingdoms are like right next to each other, and we didn't know about this like neighboring kingdom prior to the 18 minutes into this movie. So yeah, it doesn't make any sense why they somehow are like trapped by being impressed by this one kingdom. It's like, oh, I don't know. It seems like there's just a 15-minute walk from the other one. It's got to be some other places.
Before that point, though, I feel like the first movie's not necessary to watch this movie, which is weird,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, no,
Because
it's very weird. Well, I was trying to remember whether it's necessary because I was like, I haven't seen that movie in 8 years. I wonder why I'm having such a hard time following it. Maybe it's because I haven't seen that movie in 8 years. And then actually, it's like, oh no, this is just a completely different thing.
yeah, because again, I mean, they gave a little bit of backstory as to why and what had happened, but when the queen brings up, again, when she's trying to bait Maleficent, she brings up the whole thing about, well, Aurora, you're really a princess from another kingdom, and to remind me what happened, your dad died, and there was some curse put on a baby, and that was you, and the king's like, oh, who would put a curse on a baby? That was really it. And it's almost like saying,
Yeah.
hey, by the way, there was a whole kingdom for you to run, and we just erased that. We just pretend like
Hmm.
that never happened. It's almost like we've retconned that, and we've set you up as you're like this fairy queen now, which sounds like Dairy Queen when I say it out loud, but like this fairy queen, and you're in the moors, and all of that life is left behind you, and it's like it's a reset from the beginning. So I don't really think you need to know anything about the first live action movie, like the one we're calling the second movie. I don't think you need to know that. If you know the story of Sleeping Beauty, I think you can go right into this one,
Hmm.
because they seem to
Yeah.
erase all of it, other than the fact that I feel like at the end of Sleeping Beauty, your parents are still alive.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
But now
they were a little
we've
more
jumped.
harsh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, this is a darker movie to start, but that's correct. I don't think you need actually to watch any, even the original Sleeping Beauty to watch this.
So uh, once that happens, and bringing us back to the whole thing with the tomb blooms and them like raiding the land, and then they shoot down her, her savior, and then she takes him back to the I guess the like Dark Fae Island. And once he's there, they start to kind of commune, and now they're preparing for battle, and now the queen is preparing for battle. So we kind of go back and forth between that, and along that way, Aurora figures out that the queen's been up to no good, and she tries to escape, and then let Prince Philip know that that's happening, and that it was all his mom's fault, that the dad is in this like wakeless sleep, right? And then when all of this is going back and forth, it's this battle preparation scene that I don't know took what 20 minutes
Yeah,
seemingly
that's
back
the
and
kind of
forth.
stuff that I really don't. The battles. I'm not into battle scenes, and definitely not into preparing for battle scenes.
Yeah, I get that. So once all that's happened, then they start the battle, and it's just like all there's no battle plan on the part of the Fae. They're just like, let's just go kick some butt, and they just fly in to do that. Meanwhile, somehow quickly they've because the little pixie guy says, hey, it's going to take me some time to kind of process all this stuff and make you this dust. But he made a heck of a lot of it real quick because like there's all these like booby traps all over the place. She lines the top of the
Mhm.
building. She's got down to a science. And then there's pumpkin bombs, which just makes me think of Hobgoblin from Spider-Man. But she's got pumpkin bombs full of like, why put them in a pumpkin? I don't know. Anyway, she puts the red powder in a pumpkin, and then they just exploded all over the place. And if the Fey people get it on them, then they just turn to dust. And if the more fairies get it, then they turn into plants. Oh, that's the other thing I thought about with Marvel is that these big, huge like tree fairies looked a lot like Groot, but
Yes, yes, and I'm not even like a Marvel person, but I recognize that from the Guardians of the Galaxy ride in Disneyland. I was like, this looks like Groot. And
yep.
again, I thought it looked not as good as Groot, the animation, but maybe that's just me.
No, and speaking of which, something that didn't look as good. Why did the Maleficent and um, when her raven turns into a bear, why do they always have beaks? What's up with that? You know what I'm talking about?
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. Uh, Beaks and horns and animal parts, I guess, is a theme throughout. But yeah,
Well, I mean, like I get why the raven might have had a beak in it as a raven, but when he turns into a bear, he's also a rave. He's also got that beak on him,
yeah,
and I don't know. That just
yeah.
seemed a little odd to me. But so they have the pumpkin thing. Here again. I'm gonna probably have a completely different synopsis here in a minute when we give our final thoughts. But here's the one thing that bothered me more than anything else is the scene
Okay.
where they bring in the fairies into the church to basically create to do like this genocide thing. They bring all the fairies into the church and they shut the doors. And you've got all of this powder. What's the best way to release the powder in the church is to put it inside the bellows of the organ and then to play music to their deaths. And then you've got these
Yeah,
special keys that she has labeled as like with red, and she'll hold those down for a little while, but she's going through and she's like really feeling the music, and she's like death, death, and it's just like what, why, I mean, if you wanted to put an end to those folk, all you had to do was just blow up one of these pumpkins inside, and then the dust would have gone everywhere and they would have been all
spray
taken care of.
everything. Yeah. No, the whole organ thing, they make it as theatrical as possible. That's for sure.
You had no problem with that?
Um, no, I had problems with all of it. That in particular was just like, okay, of course.
Yeah. So then, and again, in that one in particular, as they're inside the church and they're running around trying to get out, um, some of them turn into flowers. Like the tree
Mhm.
fairies try to protect the smaller fairies, and in doing so, get turned into trees. Just very strange the choice of that. And I really thought there was going to be a resolution, and maybe there's a draft of this somewhere where there is, where one of the three main fairies gets turned into flowers, and then at the very end, when she makes the dress blue and they kind of look over to the side, I thought, oh, she's back. Like, Maleficent used these amazing powers she has to turn everyone who had been turned into flowers back. But she's still a flower. She just happens to still be a
Yeah,
fairy with powers.
I don't know. It reminds me of this book that I read my daughter by Danica McKellar about flowers that turn asked to be turned into fairies and then asked to be turned back into fairies, and they looked exactly like that book. So yeah, no, it doesn't exactly make sense why she's okay but still a flower.
So Tony Stank 1138 just said in chat, Disney makes another villain the good guy. Disney has just done away with villains, it seems. I mean, we kind of love to love the villains, right? When they made the big announcement at D23 that they may make a villains land, the place went bananas, and so that's true though. They're humanizing the villains. The more that we go on, the less that there is really an evil guy. If you think about like Thanos, Thanos is a guy who has a plan and a mission and a reason for what he's doing. He's not just this crazy, crazy god that's looking to just kill people. He's doing it for the mercy of the universe, and you're like, okay, you might even sympathize with that. You don't want it to happen, but you may go, okay, I get that. And it's like, why are you, let's just make him the bad guy. Even like Loki's become a great good guy. And to your point, Tony, at the end of this movie, I'm cheering for Maleficent. I want her to succeed. I want her to win, as opposed to the Queen, who now you've made me hate. She, and maybe again, they didn't do a great job of giving us her backstory or her reasoning, and they kind of throw it out there just willy nilly at the end. But at that point, it's too late. I already hate her.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
yeah, that's a good point, man. So
Yeah, I mean, I think like I said in the beginning, there was like this whole like trend of that for a while in like the early 2000s of not just Disney, but that's like Wicked is still
yeah,
running on Broadway because it's kind of interesting to tell that story. And I think I actually really like that as a person. I find it really fascinating to understand people who do terrible things and their motivations for it and humanize them. Doesn't necessarily always excuse the behavior, but it's really interesting to me to understand it. And I think like we we like as a culture tend to like to shame people, and I think it's more interesting to be like, oh, like how did this person come to do this really terrible act? But all that said, I do think that the best Disney villains, you have some hint of the motivation in them. Like Scar, like is tired of being the younger brother and wants to have the power, like the older brother. You have like Ursula was at one point a part of the society and was regularly invited to the palace. Right? She says she once lived in the palace, and then we don't really get to see exactly what happened, but um, there's some hurt there and stuff that maybe had her turn into it. And I think that makes for a better villain than people who are just like, I don't understand why this person is behaving in this like purely evil way. So I don't mind the trend to like to humanize them and figure it out, but it certainly is a trend, and it's certainly something we're seeing more and more.
yeah, for sure. Dawn said no, to the whole idea of me justifying Thanos. She said no, I still hate Thanos. Um, yeah, and we may hate him even more is when we see King Thanos. But the other thing about this, about your motivations, is that a lot of the true villains feel like their motivations are justified. That they have been kind of like you just said about Scar. I think that's a perfect example. It's just like I've been slighted, and from the outside you look at it and say, well, Mufasa treated him well. He treated him like a brother. He gave him, he invited him to things. He just didn't want to do it. He just stewed and got, more angry and more upset. So, to the point where he wants to take over. And so I feel like his motivation wasn't really properly explained. He just seemed to be evil. So, and again, it's really
Mm-hmm.
basic in some of those cartoons where it's just like they're just the bad guy. You just know it. You don't need to know why. But I get what you're saying, that if you're going to go live action with this and you're going to explain their motivations to me, maybe you end up like we do in Maleficent, liking her. Like when she comes back at the very end in her regular form and says hello, beastie. I'm like, yeah, all right, good.
Yeah.
This is what I was looking for in this movie, is for her to come out on top. And then there's this like seemingly unnecessary transformation she does of the entire kingdom. She's got all of this magic, and what she's going to do is make the entire kingdom full of flowers. Um, and they're making this really great wedding. Now the thing about the wedding was the mom, who is the queen, Ingrid, she has decided, instead of giving her son a wedding day, this is the day that she creates, like, you know genocide. Like she doesn't care. Like why pick that day? Like Why not just do it any other day? Why decide to do it on your son's wedding day?
Maybe because of the easy access to the people that she wants to eliminate. I don't know. It's pretty terrible.
Unrelated, I won't talk about this. This is MCU. Dawn's got my head reeling about Josh Brolin because Josh Brolin was like Cable in in Deadpool, and Deadpool was part of the MCU, but he's also Thanos in the MCU. So, like, does he continue on as Cable? I don't. Interesting. Um, so, with all that said, is there anything else that you want to talk to specifically about this movie? Because obviously, at the end, it wraps up in a nice little bow. Um, Prince Philip makes this gesture toward, like, he's decided that he's going to be on the right side of this, and he makes his gesture towards one of the Fae, the leader of the Fae, uh, and he's like, okay, I don't want a war. I don't want to shed any blood today. And Maleficent just happens to see this go down out of the corner of her eye, and she's like, okay, he's all right in my book. Like, that was a little corny that she just happened to see this moment from like 30,000 feet up, that where he's decided to put down his sword against these people. Also, the fact that like they wouldn't have torn the queen up like limb from limb. She just ended up falling for some reason
Yeah,
down the side of the building, and then Maleficent
gently.
turns her into a goat.
Yes, very gently.
So they kind of like,
Yeah.
I feel like they got a little sloppy at the end is what I'm basically saying, is that they just were like, oh, we are over on this. We got to wrap this up. Let's go ahead
Mhm.
and put a bow on it and call it done.
Which is another reason I wonder the target audience for it, because like nothing actually happens to her, but if it was like meant for an older audience, I think she would have gotten her due. Um, but like this is like, oh, maybe a 6-year-old could watch this
So
because you're not watching something really.
so the tangle moment I was talking about is that there's a conversation moment. We're up at the top of the turret, and it's the final showdown between Maleficent and Ingrid, and then Aurora gets in the way, and she's like, oh, I know you. You're not going to do anything, and she causes basically the death of Maleficent by like just jibber jabbing. Like, let's lock the woman up, the crazy woman up first, instead of giving her time to find a crossbow, load it up, and shoot this pumpkin bomb thing. And so she goes to shoot it, and Maleficent grabs her, does a spin move, takes the arrow to the back, it blows up, and Maleficent goes away. And then Aurora cries on top of the ashes. Is the basic gist that the tears of love that she had for Maleficent have brought her back?
I had no idea, but that is like the greatest interpretation. That makes a lot more sense and actually fits with like what we see with with the king when he's like in his slumber and his like the kiss isn't waking him up from the slumber because it's not true love, and so here are the tears of true love. I like that interpretation. I'm gonna say that's canon.
Okay. Well, again, that's very much like Tangled, right? She's lost her magic hair.
Mhm.
Flynn Rider is dying. She
Right.
cries, and her magical tears uh, heal his wounds. And so,
Hmm.
the tears of love. So maybe we are getting away from the kiss of love, the true love's kiss, and we're getting to the tears of love as being the thing that saves you. I mean,
Yeah.
I, I don't know. It just seemed a little bit like, is that what's happening here? I'm not 100% sure. I think it is, but I'm not 100% sure. So, anyway, so then it's happily ever after, and then she's flying, and she kind of comes in and out of like the picture, and I'm like, this is Superman. Like, this is 1977 Christopher Reeve Superman flying in and out of frame. So she at this point is a hero. This is her hero moment
Yeah.
at this point, right? So
This is
everything
a
we know
victory
about
lap.
right, but everything we know about Maleficent, the Kingdom Keepers books, the Phantasmic, all of the things that we know from the original Sleeping Beauty is she's just a horrible human being. She's not only have we seen justification for her, but we've seen a redemption arc for her here actually.
Hmm. Yeah, it all happens and it all happens very quickly.
Nice little bow. Okay, so honestly, I was looking at it for a little while and I was like, hey, I'm gonna ask you some trivia on this. I'm not gonna ask you any trivia on this one because I feel like you were
Thank
already
God.
kind of like, based on the messaging you sent me, I feel like you were like blinded, red blindness kind of a thing, like with blinded by rage, when you were watching this. So I
Yeah.
certainly didn't want to
Yeah.
like have you like trying to figure out, you know, how many stripes on a fairy's face or anything like that. So we're not going to do that. But any other thoughts before I ask you for your final verdict on this? Anything else that I missed? I mean, there's not really a lot of music to it.
Yeah.
There's one weird song in the credits at the end. It feels like a
Mhm.
pop song. There's not really. I mean, and we talked about the cast. The cast was great. The acting was
Yeah.
one of the high points, but nothing else that
The
you want
makeup
to.
and the costuming was quite good. I felt like the dresses that like Elle Fanning was wearing was really reminiscent of like the animated version, and you could like they had that quality. And I think it was nominated for an Oscar for the
I
costuming or
think
the makeup or something like that. So like
the
some of
very
the
first one was
design
at least.
in that element was really quite good.
Yeah. The one thing I didn't talk about was like her makeup, like the choice to make those things in her cheeks.
Hmm.
Um, I I feel like I'm here for it, but I'm not really sure why. Like, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, I liked it. Actually, when my husband came in, I was watching it, and he was like, "Is that Angelina Jolie's cheekbones, or is that makeup?" And it's like, obviously, that's makeup. It's like a little bit alien-esque, and I think like it helped. It helped the narrative of her not being human to have her look, have her face look like something that you wouldn't see on a human face.
Well, in between that and her eyes and the horns, but I mean the horns
Hmm.
in this could almost be a hat, right? Like,
Yes,
I
yes.
mean, I'm pretty sure that at one point or another they probably sold this hat at Disney parks. So that could just be a hat, but
If
the
they did,
eyes
I'm
I
sure
think
you
could be
have it,
anything.
Rob.
No, nah, that ain't my kind of party. But the cheekbones definitely are very unique in the way they put that together, and then also her eyes in this, what they do with her eyes and the glowing, and
Hmm.
then the teeth is interesting too. Like I feel like, did the
Yeah,
animated character have fangs? Because I feel like that this she has fangs
yeah,
in this.
no. Yeah, she looks almost like a vampire from the
Right,
teeth.
that is true. I don't know why. Um, so I basically I think we're ready to kind of close this out. But I want to say to everyone who's been watching, thank you. We appreciate you, Tony Stank 1138, Dawn. I know that I saw Chief in there for a while. Steven, um, SeaWorld. I'm trying to go back through Jarrett. Thank you guys so much for joining us in chat, for talking with us, for having sometimes your own conversations. Dawn says Goonies never say die. That was dropped in there, so um, you know it's just it's a lot of fun doing this with you guys, and Allison, having you back, as many park centers as we got to do together. I appreciate you taking some time out of your busy family schedule to talk about these movies with me. But I think next time I'm gonna have to let you pick from something else, because I feel like this was not your movie. So with all of that said, and again, please make sure to give us a like. Please make sure to give us a thumbs up and subscribe to this channel if you have not already. We've got lots of great content, including News Tonight is tomorrow night with their Halloween special. We do Park Center on Sunday nights, and Disney Entertainment News Today dropped yesterday if you want to check that out. And then the next week, it's going to be me and Charlie talking about Zorro on Wednesday for Deep in the Plus. So please make sure to come back and join us for that conversation. He is pumped. So I cannot wait to see what he's going to be bringing to the table with that. But now, it's the moment, Allison. This is it. This is why you're here. Everyone needs to know. Would you recommend this movie?
No, and I almost always recommend the stuff that we've watched too, so I feel really bad just totally trashing this movie. I liked the original Maleficent. I don't understand why this got made. There's a non-Disney podcast called How Did This Get Made, where they track movies that don't really make any sense, and and make fun of them. And I felt like this was like a perfect candidate for that kind of movie, that kind of review. And because I just kept thinking it the whole time, like, who greenlit this? Who spent all of this money on this massive talent? Who, shine as much as they can, but I did not like the movie. And the script was hard to follow. It was hard to be invested, regardless of the time that they were that they took to for the actors to really get into the character. So yeah, no, this is not the movie for me. It was frustrating, but with those analogies you made to world building, this Lord of the Rings, George R. R. Martin kind of world building, I don't like those movies. I don't like fantasy elements. I like sci-fi. I don't like fantasy. So it could be me. Maybe watch it and see. And I'd love to hear what the those watching have to say, if they agree or disagree with me. But I would not recommend this movie to people that have a similar taste to myself.
You know, yeah, I would say I disagree in the fact that I didn't hate the movie. I mean, we definitely go deep into these movies on Deep in the Plus. Like I said, the only thing that's off limits is something that's outside of Disney Plus. But we definitely go deep into talking about like the things that could have been better and all that. I think overall, I think it's a fine movie to watch. I think it's not the best movie. I will put that out there. I think if you enjoy this particular canon of Sleeping Beauty and Maleficent, it is a good, it is one that you can watch. In the same way with like that this is the first movie that we reviewed that I couldn't remember earlier, as um, we did Hocus Pocus 2 was one of the first movies that we did for spooky season this year. And that one, it's one of those where it's like a lot of fan service. I don't think this was fan service, but I think that if you liked the Maleficent character from the first one, you'll enjoy going back to it this time. I don't think you have to watch those other movies to watch this, but I wouldn't put this on the top of your list, but I'm not sure that I'm ready to disband it completely. So I would, like you said, like to hear what everybody has to say in the comments after we close the show out. Please leave a comment. Please make sure to like the video. Please make sure to come back and hang with us again next week. And Allison, we're going to have you back for a movie that you love. We're going to figure out one that you already love, and we're going to talk about it. Because you and I already did. We did the Princess Diaries. We did Enchanted. And we did the 10
10
Things
Things
I
I
Hate
Hate
About
About
You,
You.
right? And
Yeah,
so,
and also
Musketeers.
the Musketeers go to Disney World.
That's one we both had a good time ripping on, though. That one was interesting.
Yes.
So if y'all want to go back and watch that one, but I honestly, I love talking to you about this stuff. Let's get something else on the books. And Anastasia was one you and I were going to do, but then Disney pulled that one from Disney Plus too. So there's a
Yeah,
lot of
we'll
good
find
stuff
a
coming
good
up,
one.
though. Yeah, maybe something for Christmas.
Ooh, yes, a nice Christmas movie. But I love talking to Rob, and I love being on the show.
Yay! And thank you so much to our Wigs members as well. We love our Wigs. The WDWNT Interglobe Society. If you enjoy the programming, we would love to have you as part of our family. You can check it out. It's our Patreon program, patreon.com/WDWNT. Thanks again, Allison. Thank you again, everyone, for watching, and we will see you next time. Have a great week.